election campaign, perhaps because her son had had a relationship with a woman in Kareem's family. Sarah was stripped naked and raped with a bayonet, as well as by 3 men while Commander Kareem watched his orders carried out. Blood was dripping down her body when they sent her to the street naked. She and her husband spoke out against this. Her husband paid for this with his life. He was killed in May of last year, 2009. And how did Sarah sum this up? She said, our enemies, the people who did this to me, they are the government. These are the people the U.S. has put in power. Now, what about Iraq? We just had an election there. The media is hailing this as a giant success, you know, democracy, blah, blah, blah. But women in Iraq, and I'm not a supporter of Saddam Hussein. I was there in 1991. People talked to me about what that was like. He was a tyrant. But the situation of women is worse now than it was under Saddam Hussein. Why? Because the United States backed reactionary Shia religious parties who insisted on religious rule and the repeal of the 1959 family law. And I'm not arguing here that women were liberated under Saddam and, you know, and fully equal. But under the 1959 family law, which was a secular law, there were certain protections to women's rights to property, divorce, equal custody, children, and so on. But since the U.S. invasion, Sharia law has been enshrined in the Iraqi constitution, and in which guarantees women are treated in an inferior way. And Ayatollah Sistani, who's treated in the media here as if he's some kind of enlightened moderate, has ordered Iraqi women to be veiled. Particularly in Basra, women have been beheaded or had acid thrown in their face for not doing it. At one point it was 15 a month. And demanded that gays and lesbians be killed. These are the people the U.S. has put in power in Iraq. And I have to say that there are Christian fundamentalists in the United States who would like to do the same thing to women. Perhaps not force them to wear a veil, but taking the right to abortion away from women it's not a question of this a little bit of right or this. It's fundamental rights and fundamental humanity. And guess what? Yes, that's right. And guess what? Your president, Barack Obama, just did. Threw women under the bus to get health care passed.
And my president, man.
Thank you. I had to challenge people out there. Okay, so here's the question. And Bill was wrestling with this too. Why are we in a situation where the Christian Science Monitor can write, after 7 years of war in Iraq and 9 in Afghanistan, residents of York, Pennsylvania talk about how the wars have become like a screensaver, always there but barely acknowledged. Or Annie Day, as Annie Day writes in Revolution newspaper, which is back there, after seeing The Hurt Locker and then seeing it win Oscar after Oscar, she writes, there are times when you feel we've entered the twilight zone. Large sections of people with a capacity for progressive and humane sentiments find themselves standing with and supporting criminals, which is what the Hurt Locker does, which is exactly. So I'm going to, look, there are many reasons for this. I'm trying to be brief here, but I want to lay out 4 things quickly that I think contribute, not the only 4 things, but 4 things that contribute to what I consider a broad paralysis and state of, not wanting to know what's going on and disbelief. First thing, there's a place where epistemology meets morality. We have to challenge people. It is not okay not to look at something because you feel uncomfortable about looking at it, or looking at it makes you feel uncomfortable. It's not okay to believe something because believing it makes you feel comfortable. Point one. Point two, facing what the meaning of Obama is. People have a billion excuses. Oh, he's under pressure from the right. He wants to do good, but blah, blah, blah. No. What people need to face is Bush was no exception. Bush was the personification of U.S. imperialism at a particular moment in history. And so is Obama. And so is Obama. Obama isn't the proof of the reformability of the U.S. political system. He's proof of its unreformability. Why? Because what exists in the United States is not, in essence, democracy. It's capitalism, imperialism, and political structures that support that. That's what Obama is doing. Healthcare, bank bailout, Afghanistan, Iran, Israel, Iraq, you name it. It's about meeting the needs and demands of imperialism, because the rulers of this country, and Bill touched on some of this, feel these wars are essential to the entire functioning of their system. They're not just doofuses up there. This is how global imperialism works. This is why they're pursuing it. And people have to face that reality. And in my view, until this system is overthrown, and if the problem is the system, the economic system, then you need a different one. And how do we do that? In my view, that's revolution. Point three. This is something that Bob Avakian said a few years ago, which I think is also very important in terms of understanding the terrain we're standing on and the problems we face. And this is sort of looking at the world, especially the Middle East, Central Asia, very broadly with these U.S. wars. What we see in contention here with jihad, Islamist movements or Islamic fundamentalism on the one hand and World Mac Crusade on the other, are historically outmoded strata among colonized and oppressed humanity, countries like Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, and so on, up against historically outmoded ruling strata of the imperialist system of the United States, Europe, and so on, which of course does far, far, far greater damage than the Islamists. These two reactionary poles reinforce each other. Think of Gardez. What's the impact of a massacre on people? They turn to whoever is fighting. Even while opposing each other, if we side with either, we end up strengthening both. And this is one of the reasons, and I just think that's important to ponder in terms of what's paralyzing people, because I think one thing is they have to choose either one of these, and they don't like either, and paralysis sets in. I think what we have to do is bring forward another way that is neither of these and poses a positive, liberating, radical alternative and revolutionary alternative for people. And this is one reason that I am so excited about what has happened in Iran over the last 9 months, where I realize it's complicated, and I realize there are different forces, some of which are reactionary, involved in this movement. But the essence of this movement is not pro-imperialism. These are millions of people, my friends. I reported from Iran in 1979 and 1980, who are rising up against a hated and reactionary theocracy. And there are revolutionary communist forces in the middle of this. There's potential for a whole different kind of force to emerge in the world. And it is tremendously inspiring to see this at a time when too much of the world is just sitting around getting abused day after day after day. And to see young people and women and many different